So I didn't know quite how I would go about this review. I mean, there are tons of DeLorean videos on YouTube already, so I think I'll try to make this review of a 32-year-old car in a modern context. I'll go over the various features and design aspects, but I'll try to do the actual review of the vehicle as it holds up in 2016. By that I mean, this was advertised as a luxury vehicle when it came out in 1981, and it was a luxury vehicle. But is it still a luxury vehicle in 2016 as we think of luxury vehicles like Audi or Lexus? How does it compare to a modern vehicle? So I'll go over these points in this video. I also debated how much history I'd tackle, because as any car buff or historian will tell you, the DeLorean is steeped not only in automotive history, but world history as well. The story starts with John DeLorean in the 1960s while he was an engineer for General Motors and saved Pontiac from the gutter by creating the GTO. As well as many other engineering accomplishments we still implement in modern vehicles to this day, like recessed windshield wipers and the modern automatic transmission. It goes deeper into world history as well, getting into the Irish Civil War, the oil crisis, and politics of the era. So I guess I'll cover some DeLorean history and myth basics. Prepare your brain skillets, because I'm about to crack some eggs of knowledge. John DeLorean's timing in producing a sports car was possibly the worst in history. To put it into historical context, the United States was stagnated in an oil crisis and economic downturn. Adding to that, the EPA had imposed strangled emissions guidelines, and the Department of Transportation also imposed its own laws that would prove terrible for sports cars. To give an example, Chevrolet never offered a 1983 Corvette to the public. They skipped that year entirely. Ford put out their worst Mustangs ever in the face of EPA restrictions and DOT regulations. It was the rise of the fuel-sipping econobox. The sports car was all but dead. What was available had laughable power output, and the DeLorean was no different. John DeLorean wanted the DMC-12 to have at or above 200 horsepower out of the PRV V6, and an ass-on-the-asphalt ride height for good handling. But after government regulations all but crippled the DMC-12, it wound up with a wheezing 130 horsepower thanks to an asthmatic catalytic converter requirement and inches added to the ride height, utterly mutilating its handling characteristics. Some said it looked like a Lotus with a monster truck suspension. Car reviews of the day knocked it for its less than adequate power and body roll for a $25,000 sports car. By the way, the 12 in DMC-12 was supposed to be the price, $12,000, but it wound up being $25,000. The stock 0 to 60 time with the manual transmission was around 9 seconds. Don't even ask about the automatic transmission figures. While this was average for the day, even for most sports cars, it was unacceptable for a $25,000 sports car. That was Porsche 911 money. Eurospec DeLoreans got a better shake, 170 horsepower and the intended ride height. Thankfully, modern DeLoreans are easily brought down to intended ride height and the motor easily brought up to 200 naturally aspirated ponies with better cams and a less restrictive exhaust. 200 horsepower is good for a 0 to 60 in around 6 seconds, much more befitting of the car's looks. A BAE turbo can even be added for around 250 horsepower at 5 psi. Some owners opt for engine swaps, like an LS1, but while this is totally rad, I favor keeping everything stock. The stock tranny is good for just over 300 horsepower, which is more than adequate. 300 horsepower in a DeLorean is unimaginable savagery off the line. One myth you'll commonly hear about the DeLorean is that it's heavy. The DeLorean actually weighs about 2,800 pounds, which is exactly the same weight as a Scion FRS or Subaru BRZ. The issue with the DeLorean is, just imagine that FRS or BRZ with only 130 horsepower. That's what's going on with the DeLorean. It's not heavy, it's just underpowered. Early DeLoreans had reliability issues when they first arrived, and all cameras were aimed at the car. This was largely due to the earlier cars having a small alternator and a new, unskilled labor force. The cars would have a dead battery after driving with the lights on, and some body panels looked kind of wonky on early cars. The build quality naturally got better with each batch, and bigger alternators were implemented, alleviating the dead battery issue. But the damage was done. No one cared about the improvements to quality after the cameras were pointed at the next big story of the day. The main issue across all year models was the cooling system. Keeping a rear engine cool is tough in any car. Porsche just made their motors air-cooled for years. The DeLorean had its radiator up front, which means it relies on electric fans, rather than belt-driven fans like a lot of front-engine cars. The problem was the fans. The stock DeLorean fan circuit pulled tons of current and would blow the fuses and relays regularly. The problem was mostly solved with a jumpered relay, rather than a fuse relay. My car still relies on this update, but bigger, better, low current draw fans are available today. I'll update my fans to those soon. Replacing most of my lights with LEDs also help keep the electrics happy. The motor, while underpowered in its 1980s EPA spec, is itself very reliable and economical, around 30 mpg on the highway. I've had mine for 16 years so far with no issue. I used to torture it by delivering pizza for a couple years. The key is to freaking maintain it like any other car. Just drive it regularly and change the oil. Lots of owners let their cars rot in storage for years. Any car that is neglected for years will need expensive repairs to the fuel system. At the least, Honda, DeLorean, doesn't matter. Take care of your car and it will take care of you. There were about 9,000 DeLoreans made and around 6,000 are still registered and on the road. The rest are still being discovered in barns and storage around the world. So let's get to the DeLorean's various features. What still surprises me even today is that it has electric mirrors, and they still work. What cars, besides a Rolls-Royce, had electric adjusting mirrors in 1981? Not many. The windows are also electric, but that's nothing special, even by 80s standards. The rear window is also electric defrost. The engine also has electronic fuel injection, which was rather special in the era, as a lot of cars were still carbureted. So, the DeLorean was ahead of its time in many regards. It also had front crumple zones and a fuel tank protected within the frame, both fairly advanced features not found in many vehicles at the time. You already know about the stainless steel and gull-wing doors, but some people think it's a stainless steel body. It's not. Those are just panels bolted onto a fiberglass body. The idea was that if you got into a fender bender, you just go to the dealership and pop on a new panel, good as new, instead of an expensive body repair. As far as the gull-wing doors, in addition to looking super sweet, I have found them to be immensely practical and useful. Contrary to myth, they take almost zero side clearance to open. People think you can't get out if someone parks too close, which is false. You can enter and exit the vehicle in that situation much easier than a traditional door. They also keep you nice and dry in the rain, because they act like umbrellas. The worry with gull wings comes in the event of a rollover accident. To begin with, I have never in my life heard of a DeLorean rollover. You'd have to hit the edge of a ramp going 88 miles an hour to flip a DeLorean. In the event of a rollover, the DeLorean is designed with a windshield and side windows that can, quote-unquote, easily be kicked or punched out, though I pray I'll never have to test the 30-year-old window glue. The exterior is, well, the exterior. Everyone has seen a DeLorean at least in pictures, and besides minor visual changes from 81 to 83, they all look the same. The earliest models have a gas flap in the hood and grooves. Then just grooves and no gas flap. Then the late models, like my 1983, have a completely flat hood and DeLorean logo. I personally like the completely flat, grooveless look the best. It's just a simple, beautiful slab of gorgeous stainless steel. Speaking of stainless steel, lots of people wonder how I take care of it to keep it looking new. It's stainless steel. I don't do anything to it. That's the whole point of stainless steel. It's stainless. If it gets some tough tree sap on it, I use paint thinner, xylene, or even gasoline to get it off. Try that on a painted car. Wait, don't actually do that to your car. What most people aren't familiar with is the interior and what it's like to actually drive. The interior is actually a very nice place to be. The best way to describe the driving position is to picture yourself laying in bed with your head propped up on a pillow, holding a steering wheel. John DeLorean was 6'5" and designed the car to accommodate taller people, unlike many sports cars. The passenger seat is even better. Only an SUV could have better legroom. As the driver or passenger, doing 8 hours at a time on a long road trip is a breeze. Very smooth, very comfy. I and many owners think of the DeLorean as a wonderful GT car, Grand Touring, rather than a pure sports car. It is wonderful covering long distances. The leather is soft and so are the armrests. Now, I live in Texas and the stainless steel definitely turns into a rolling convection oven if there's no AC. Luckily, the AC in these things is like a leaf blower in a meat freezer. My stereo doesn't work. It's straight out of 1983, but nobody thinks stereo when they think about the DeLorean. You can make it as good as you want aftermarket. GPS, Bluetooth, MP3, iPod dock, DVD, backup camera, whatever you want. The steering is heavy in a parking lot, but perfect at speed. You feel the road in your hands, which is a good thing. Nothing is power assisted. Not the steering, not the brakes, and dear God, not the clutch. The clutch being non-power assisted isn't bad until you get into rush hour gridlock. Your knee will be trembling 10 minutes in and you'll want a wheelchair when you get out. A modern power assisted manual in traffic is about as tough as being licked by kittens. The DeLorean is great to drive, but getting out of it and into a modern vehicle is like dropping the donut off a wooden bat, then dropping that wooden bat, and then swinging with an aluminum bat. Visibility in the DeLorean is good, but not great. Way better than the Countach, but not as good as a convertible Miata. Storage space is limited. It's a rear-engine two-seater, but you've got a storage shelf behind the seats and a shallow trunk, or boot for the rest of you, up front. It's good for groceries, luggage, or golf clubs, or whatever, but you're not moving an apartment with it. But it's a friggin' pickup truck compared to an MR2 Spider. People who by numbers alone have probably never even seen the car in person, let alone driven it, say, DeLoreans suck, they're so slow. Not many people, but some. It's how you can easily invalidate their opinion on cars in general. Any car enthusiast over 13 years old knows a car is more than its 0 to 60 time. So, if they care about speed, they've got to cross most beloved classics off the list. The DeLorean is just legendary and really freaking cool all on its own. It doesn't need to win a drag race. It already wins just for being a freaking DeLorean. I don't know of any other car so widely loved by every walk of life, not just gearheads and petrol heads. 5-year-old little girls love the DeLorean, 90-year-old women like it. The D&D crowd loves it, computer programmers love it, muscle-bound bikers love it, car enthusiasts love it. Anybody who was ever a kid or still a kid at heart loves it. It's just so cool. That's the best way to describe it. History has forgiven its faults because it's just so damn cool. There has never been anything like it before or since. It is truly timeless and its following just keeps growing and growing. So that's my 1983 DeLorean DMC-12. I know there'll be comments below about its speed or ignorant hearsay about cocaine. Comes with the territory. But the myths are what keep the interest alive, and in that aspect, I'm cool with the myths. The same person telling me it was built to traffic cocaine then tells me it was built with a helicopter engine, which is amazing, since 5 minutes and Google are both things that exist. But it doesn't surprise me, people are too lazy to signal lane changes these days. Oh well, I'm happy to point them in the right direction and fill their skillets with wakey knowledge, eggs, and bakey. I hope you've enjoyed this unorthodox, honest review of the DeLorean DMC-12. I hope I've been able to showcase it in a real-world light you may not have seen before unless you've owned one. At the end of the day, it's still just a car. It just has neat skin and cool doors. Feel free to comment below, even if it's just Honey Nut Trolleos or whatever. YouTube comments are why the aliens won't give us warp anyways, so go to town. But in all honesty, I hope you liked it, and feel free to click the thumbs up and the old subscribe button. Have a great one, everybody. Back to the cooling fans on the radiator. The stock... Oh my goodness. Well, I got some footage, didn't I?